I'm Decathlon Gamer. Welcome back to F1 Manager 23, episode 55. We've got a couple things to talk about before we get into the race. I don't want to take long to get there. Once we get there, we have a huge real-life breaking news story that we're going to discuss in detail, and I'll give you where I'm at on that one and why it's such a big deal. But the two things first. Let's make that three. Car development update. We are slipping. The engine cooling has risen now all the way to 4th, but the brake cooling, which is actually better, is only 11th. Dirty air cornering is still 1st. Cornering is still 1st, except high speed has dropped from 1st to 5th over the last month. We're going to need to put a little extra effort in on high speed if we want to get back on top for that one. Meanwhile, top speed has also dropped from the top spot to 2nd. At acceleration, which we had clawed to 11th, is already back down to 13th. So things are changing, and at least the recent upgrades have other teams catching up a little bit. We do have upgrades on the way. We are committing. I'm actually doing my first front wing upgrade of the year because our front wing was so dominant. But we definitely have some things coming. In the driver development update, we have Crawford's first couple weeks with the team. He's only been with us for maybe a week and a half to 2 weeks so far. His overtaking goes +1. That's important for our long-term goals, and his reactions that are so good get even better at an 87. Meanwhile, Florsch picks up a point in smoothness and a point in reaction. So her biggest weakness gets a little bit closer. It's still her lowest, but it's only 1 point behind cornering now, and it's definitely headed in the right direction, in the direction it needs to go, because her just general pace is still not there to this day. You know, if Crawford's struggling to score points at a 79, if Gota at a 76 was nowhere near competitive, which of course we know what his problem was, right? He had pace, he just could not overtake another car around him, so he would lose tons of time getting caught behind slower cars, and couldn't prevent them from overtaking him. He was pretty poor in key areas. He wasn't balanced enough. I think Crawford is not going to have those issues. In his one race so far, he didn't look to have those issues. He's very balanced between a 70 and an 87. Between a 70 and an 87. Fairly balanced across the board. He's just, not terribly quick. If we start getting him into the occasional points, I think that's encouraging. If we can get him higher up the grid a little bit every once in a while, even though we might end up having to nerf him at some point, I'll be actually kind of relieved because, for one thing, I don't think Florsch is ever going to reach an 80. I think she'll be upper mid-70s is all we could expect. I mean, she has slowed down her progression. If Crawford can do something and be competitive and compete with a car that's very good, if he can score points regularly, then we know that she'll have a chance to do that. Can I ever get her to win a championship unless the car is crazy dominant? Hard to say, but there's hope if he can do well. It's the whole purpose of the series, so last year's game was a lot easier to do that in than this year's, for sure. Meanwhile, Tanaka, not a great month of development for her. +3 overall, and valuable points. I mean, cornering is speed and +2 to smoothness. Obviously, you've got to be able to handle the tires, and that was her biggest weakness. Still is. It's only a couple points now behind both cornering and defending. She's got a long ways to go yet. The third thing I wanted to check is the worry, right? Without Sargent, have we nerfed ourselves too far? We've already taken a step back, right? Let me say a step forward. Right, we took that big step back in nerfing, went too far with it, took another step forward to try to find the balance at the cost of 1.1 million. How's this going to impact the team's view? Well, board confidence remains high for now. Podium contender by 29, it's only 27. But our current goal of 7th or above, we're 9th. Now, we were 10th. We're already up to 9th in a single race with Crawford. But that is below target. Couple spots below target. That is going to hurt. But right now, because we did make last season's goal, I think we're going to be okay for a while. Finances, of course, just making sure that there is never debt is going to be a big part of keeping our job. completing last year's objective while failing the previous points contender goal only slightly keeps us balanced in that department. If we fail this year's goal, it won't be balanced, right? Then demands will be higher next year. The offset won't be there. Race performance, this is the one to keep an eye on short term. Yas Island, that's last year. Sakir is where we started this season. We're 5 races in. Disappointed, and satisfied twice. They're not happy with us. Overall, our really good has already dropped off, with half of last year and half this year for the last 10 to look at, has already dropped off to just being satisfied. But if we can at least get a fairly consistent satisfied, I don't think this is going to hurt us too much long term. Meaning we could probably get through this whole year with Jack Crawford, even if he's not scoring points, even if we ultimately finish 9th. 10th will be a real problem. 9th would definitely be a minor problem. 8th would be okay. So I think we're going to be generally all right coming out of this season with Crawford in the seat now, even if he's not performing terribly well. 3 races in a month is always really tough to try to balance the pit crew training, but what I'm able to do this month is come out exactly level on the pit crew attributes, while actually technically having, the smallest of improvements.
Welcome along to Italy, and welcome along to Imola. After returning to the Formula One calendar in 2020, Imola is now home to the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. This historic track's original outline might remain, but updates to the circuit ensure that racing here feels just as exciting in modern times. And it's an old school track with plenty of elevation changes and lots of corners. There's only one DRS zone here, but it follows the long straight right before Tamburello and should see plenty of action. Here at Imola, the drivers are ready to take on the 63 laps of the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. This race should be a good chance to see what Valtteri Bottas can manage.
Starting P8 is decent for them. Provided they keep the race clean, there's points on the table.
And it'll be exciting to see just what will happen here today. This is it, the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. And it's lights out, and away we go.
And we're racing. There's not even just one big real-life news story, and we are going to talk about that mainly. I'll avoid many conversations about the race as we're going through here, so you'll have to kind of just watch to keep up with the action. Crawford qualified 10th, but has had a great start up to P8. I think most of the field is opted for mediums, so that's helped him with good reactions and soft compound. He's gained 2 positions right off the start line. Flourish is 20th, though. She's going for the one-stopper today. We're going to have to get her settled in a little bit earlier. All right, first of 2 major news stories. Andretti denied entry to Formula One by the Formula One teams. FIA approved. They have met every requirement asked of them, and they've been denied entry anyway. Now, the reason, the explanation, most of it's just absolute bullshit. There really is no adequate explanation as to why. But even in the explanation, where they made lousy excuses about the team won't be competitive because they're going to come in on the year before regulation change, and then they're going to have to build a car for the new year. But there's new rules that you can't start working on the development of a new car until that year prior anyway. So what if they have to build a new car for entry? Because that's what you do when you gain entry. And so what if you have to build a new car for the following year as Crawford pushes on into 7th place? And he's off to a very good start in this race as he does complete that move to get that 7th place done. Then we're going to need to back off. With Crawford, I'm going for a 2-stopper. We're going to try to be more aggressive. Everybody else is going to be aiming for a 1-stopper, or most everybody's going to be aiming for a 1-stopper in this race. So we need to be able to make some forward progress, which we've done exactly that, plus 3 positions already. He's made more overtakes in three and a partial laps than we saw from Gota in his entire 4 races. So, yeah, so far so good. We have fallen away from Bottas, though. Gasly's probably going to get back around us, but as long as we can hold that P8, things will be looking good as the field starts to stretch and open up. Right now, things are generally close together. Flor's just right on Albon, but can't seem to get around him. What it boils down to is quite clear, quite obvious. It's money. And what they're talking about is diluting the prize pool from 10 teams to 11. And for what? What is it going to bring? What new addition do they bring to Formula One to offset that? A new manufacturer, big motorsport industry names. And let's be real, the Andretti name, while not huge, it is big. And for them to pretend that it's not, I mean, we have Visa, Cash App, RB. We have a drink in Red Bull. How is that a big name? What? Because they throw money at multiple motorsports, that makes them a big name? Andretti is all over multiple racing series. Big racing series. Haas is a much smaller name in the US. They let Haas in. Alfa Romeo, well, stake is going to be Alfa Romeo, right? But in the world of motorsport, there is no as big of a name as you're going to get from Ferrari. But Mercedes is a big competitive name. McLaren's not a big name around the world. They're like Ferrari, but less known. It's a small car brand. Yes, they sell expensive cars, but it's a small brand. Like, I've seen maybe 2 McLarens in my lifetime. It's not widely popular. Andretti's a big name, and leaving them out is total bullshit. It really is. And it's simply because of one thing, which they did not name, and that's diluting that prize pool to an 11th team instead of sharing it 10 ways. That selfishness, that the sport has gone a long, long ways in the last few years to diminish its fans, to hurt its fan base. I used to love the NFL. Now, I know that outside of the U.S., and I know that over a third of my audience is outside of the U.S., about 2/5. So I know for that 40% or so, so what, is going to be your approach. But let's think of this in terms of world football, soccer, as we call it here. Use that as your analogy instead of the NFL. But the NFL, the biggest sport in the U.S., I stopped watching. I stopped watching back when you had a series of incidents that the league was more than happy to brush under the rug. I still like football. I watch college football. Flor's got around Albon, by the way. She is competitive today. That's a good sign. And with a 1-stopper, if others go for the 2-stopper, that's going to help her out. Meanwhile, Crawford has gotten back around Gasly, back up to P7, 3 seconds behind, but that group behind is falling off. But the field spread has been pretty minimal through 11 laps. That's a little worrying here for Crawford in the hopes of a 2-stop strategy. But as others are going to be on the hards and he'll be on 2 sets of mediums the remainder of the race, and there's an intention to go a little bit longer on one stint and then push a lot more on the second stint with a little bit shorter window, we've already seen that he can overtake cars. The NFL had a series of wipe it under the rug incidents. For those who are familiar, great. For those that's not, just know that these were bad incidents one after another in a short period of time. Deflategate, concussion scandals, Ray Rice, Roethlisberger. Like, there was domestic abuse, there was extreme crimes, things that were just being slapped on the wrist or ignored altogether, one after another, after another, after another. And the corruption was so rampant that I walked away. Formula One has been one scandal after another for the last handful of years. And in the back of my mind, I've made the connection between the two. Why I walked away from supporting one, and I've been on the verge a couple of times of doing the same with the other. And they just keep rolling out the scandals. The lack of morality is worrying. There's only 12 seconds to last place, meaning an early pit stop earlier than just about anybody else. Well, it'll get us in clean air, but it'll get us in last place. And long term, that's a little bit of a worry. This field is much closer together than you would expect. F1 is not immune to, for me, not immune to scandals. They and the FIA have had far too many. Far too many. Mercedes way down the order. We've got an Aston Martin down the order. I'd say those are the ones that are primarily out of position. Alfa Romeo continually showing that they do have pace, but Albon and Zhou have similar ratings, and yet one is 10th and one is 20th. Are they doing a first driver, second driver in one weaker car? Or I'm not sure what's going on there and why you're seeing that, but anyway. That's the first one. We're going to get through this pit stop first before we talk about the second situation. Crawford peeling off to pit road. First stop of the day. First car to stop all day. And like I said, with this two-stop strategy, which we seem to be the only ones going for it. Part of it's because he's not great on tires. 2.465. Kind of a slow stop for us. It's a good 10th slower than really anybody else. Florsch had overtaken Magnussen, but on the softs and at the state that they're in, she gives up a little too much and gets overtaken by Magnussen. But it's nice to see that she is competitive. And Crawford comes out nearly 10 seconds off the back of the field. Not even just the back of the grid. Not a few seconds back, but 10 seconds back. That's a real worry with another stop to make. This is our chance to make that undercut effective. The second time is going to make it even more effective, but we've got to take advantage of this first one a little bit, as you can see how quickly we're gaining. Now just 7 seconds behind Albon. We have overtaken Bottas in just, one lap, 2 lap. Oh, big mistake there. Crawford ran wide. He rejoins the track, and Bottas is going to get around him, so we have not gained that position, and it looks like we're going to be following Bottas. Meanwhile, is on the hards, planning to go the distance. He just pit a bit earlier than others. That means we're a whole pit stop behind Bottas right now, and is where we had come out ahead and been on a compound that should have allowed us to get ahead, stay ahead. Now we're going to have to re-overtake him. Pretty big mistake there. That was definitely costly on the goal of trying to push here. For now, Crawford's up to P14. So we have come out ahead of a number of cars. The gap is definitely bigger than before. Gio is 20 seconds back now. So where the furthest car back was 16, and that had been Albon. Crawford has definitely taken that undercut to heart. And even with running wide, making that mistake, Crawford has had good pace here and is making forward progress. Florsch. Mistake. Right front. Still fighting with it. 12 and a half seconds. Jeez. 10 additional seconds for a lug nut issue on the first of 3 back-to-back race weekends. That extra fatigue that's going to place on the team is horribly discouraging. She's back out now in last place behind Albon. She was up by Magnussen. She's now 12 seconds behind him. And fuel recovery is occurring, but it's minimal. And as we switch to Crawford, we see Crawford spin. So his second mistake now has cost him a lot of time. Crawford is from 10th down to 14th He was right behind Bottas. So he's lost 12 seconds. So Florsch loses 12 in the pits. Crawford loses 12 on track, plus the couple he had lost previously. Absolutely shooting himself in the foot. I'm not sure he's going to be in the points today, especially when everybody else around is not pitting again, and now all of a sudden we're right back down to just 18 seconds ahead of Albon. We're still further ahead than we were, and we are on mediums. All right, as we speed things along now, second discussion. Multiple cars have crashed, but Crawford, like, how is he involved? He was in no man's land all by himself, and Ocon has caught us. So the faster Mercedes has caught us. Two cars at a tight chicane don't go well together. Now we jump to 62%. But that extends it into the day. This is quickly becoming a day to forget, where it was looking pretty good there for a bit. But again, optimism of things to come. But here's that trade-off. Incidents are going to come more regularly with an aggressive driver like Crawford versus sitting on a low aggression guy who is going to be patient and not make mistakes, and no penalties given. It is seen as a racing incident, but we've dropped again, now down to 15th, and we find ourselves back once again, now just 13 seconds ahead of Albon, 5 seconds lost. We certainly were before. I mean, Bottas is up to 6th now. The undercut worked very well. It looks like we would have been 7th. Probably could have moved up to get ahead of, this group and be somewhere around 10th or 11th when we come out. It definitely had the pace to overtake some cars, or maybe 13th, and still at that pace to overtake cars. Now I think we're too far down to do anything. This extra pit stop is only going to hurt us and drop us right to the back of the grid. All of this is just delaying a big discussion that I was wanting to have, and that is Hamilton, Ferrari. Before I even get to that, let's go back in time. Way back in time. And this is my story. This is my opinion on the matter. The fact is, he's moving to Ferrari in 1 year. I was a Formula One fan as a kid. In the United States, that's incredibly uncommon. The reason why that's uncommon is we've had very little access to Formula One over the years. It wasn't shown in the US unless you had special packages, TV packages, expensive TV packages to get it and basically get a foreign broadcast of it. My first gaming system was an Atari. Aging myself a little bit with that one, but then the NES and the PlayStation, when it launched, I was and have ever since been a Sony guy, PlayStation guy. That PlayStation was groundbreaking. The F1 game, not this F1 Manager, but the F1 title. I don't remember exactly what year it was, but it was, in theory, give or take a year, it was F1 95. I didn't know what F1 was, but I got that game for the PlayStation, and that was the game I learned to drive on. 13, 14-year-old kid. And that became my big driving experience before I ever then went and got a permit and learned how to drive for real. That game introduced me to Formula One. And of course, the mid-90s is one of the heydays of the sport. At the time, the only Formula One race, my dad hadn't even heard of Formula One, and he was an avid NASCAR fan and a bit of an IndyCar fan. And that's what I grew up with, was NASCAR. Go Rusty Wallace. The only race that was regularly broadcast in the US, Monaco. That's one of the reasons why I've got a special place for that race for me, because it was the only race I could see for years. That obviously made me a casual fan, but a fan nonetheless. Fast forward decades, and I moved back from being an expat for a few years, living abroad. I moved back home, and one day I find what is maybe the first or second race of the season and it's being televised. Couldn't believe my eyes. Was tuned in instantly and found that somewhere in that stretch, over that few years, Formula One was now being broadcast regularly in the US and on a package that I had. From that time on, I've watched every race, every season for what is now more than a decade. By the second year of tuning in, so for now, about 10 years or so since that time, I've watched every practice session, all but a couple in 10 years. And even then, usually timing is terrible in the US. Most of the races occur in the middle of the night, so I'll stream the replays of everything the next day. And so sometimes I'll speed things up in early practice sessions and, really only catch 15 minutes of an hour. But most people do that anyway. Most of you are doing that with this video right now. You're only watching 10 minutes of what is a 35-40 minute video. Florsch overtaking Ocon up to 18th. She's made progress. She's gotten back there. She's now within a second on Albon. And Crawford, with pit stops done, good to go the rest of the way, is last place. Still on the lead lap, is far enough ahead and should be fast enough as the only one out there on mediums to stave off Verstappen and Norris coming from behind, along with Russell. Those three, all three podium drivers, are about a straightaway behind Crawford here. But we're also a straightaway behind Ocon and Florsch. So yeah, we're not even just behind our teammate. We are quite some distance behind. Had we gotten things right, had we been that 20 or so seconds ahead, looks like we would have come out in P14 with some work to do to get to the points. But again, we already saw we could overtake here. We'll see here as Florsch gets around Albon. She's up to P17 now. We'll see here, given in time, can we at least catch and overtake those three? And I think that would be proof of the pudding that we can go forward. Especially, Ocon's not that fast today. But can we get back up to maybe P14? That would be the real test on whether we would have comfortably been in the points today. Red flag. If this happens 2 laps ago, we're good to go to the end of the race, and we're taking care of 2 Haas cars coming together with each other, and that's a red flag. There goes our advantage too. This race is totally ruined. Wrapping this race up real quick now, because the episode's already going on way longer than what these normally would, so if I'm going to do 2 races, we need to be quick. From this far back, there's no point. I can push forward. I can get Crawford to overtake some cars. That's all a possibility, and it's already happening a little bit as he's up to 17th and Florsch is 16th. It's not going to make any difference. Everybody's on the softs, so there is no significant advantage. The fuel's right, and we're just cruising our way to the finish here in about 7 laps. I think at this point, or here in a little bit, another lap or so, I think we can afford to be aggressive and try to push on. Florsch is holding off Crawford for the time being, at least, but let's start seeing if we can go forward. Crawford overtakes Florsch. Crawford's up to 13th now. The final lap. And 5 seconds behind Leclerc. So, yeah, there's nothing we can do to catch anybody else and do anything in these last couple laps. And Gio, with a 5-second penalty, Florsch will be 14th. Crawford will be 13th. See if she can hold off Stroll and if she can get anywhere when it comes to Gio. A little off the pace here on that final lap as we cook the tires a little too much. Cost her some pace, but 13th and 14th. Good result considering what happened in this race, considering the timing of that red flag. If that red flag comes 2 laps earlier, Crawford's going to finish in the points today. The way we were able to progress, or in theory, we could have gotten 10th out of that. The way we came from 19th to 13th. Like if we can overtake 6 cars, I think we can overtake 3 cars in those final laps. We saw it early on, especially with his takeoff off the line. Good reactions and on softs. But yeah, 13th and 14th, not bad considering. Lando Norris took the win, by the way, ahead of Russell. Verstappen fell to third after that restart. Pourchaire, Bottas, Gasly. Alfa Romeo ended up picking up 4 points. AlphaTauri pick up 2 points. Our struggle to get out of ninth is getting a little bit tougher. We did have the second quickest pit stop of the day, while not having any good ones at all today.
Welcome along to one of the biggest weekends in motorsport, here in Monaco. F1 descends on Monte Carlo for the Monaco Grand Prix, a glittering show on the Riviera and a crown for whoever can emerge victorious here. Space may be tight and overtakes few and far between, but that won't stop the drivers battling until the end on this iconic street circuit. The streets of Monte Carlo are ready as the drivers prepare for the 78 laps of the Monaco Grand Prix. And here's George Russell, focusing on the race ahead of him.
It's a promising position for them starting in P3. They'll be looking to make the most of the slipstream.
We're here and the streets are abuzz at the Monaco Grand Prix. And it's lights out and away we go.
And we're tanking here in Monaco. This is the most driver-dependent track on the circuit in the world. And the driver ratings are elevated unlike anything else here, as we already have safety car deployed right off the bat, as we've had a crash on track, and Gio has crashed at turn 4. I've put the practice components on the car as a result, seeing that Crawford did not have pace as he tried to get up underneath the car, and that's the thing, there's just no space here for overtakes, and everything we've done has been awful at this track. It's just been bad. So safety car is out, and we are 17th and 19th on the grid as everything comes together, and the massive underfueling has already turned out in a good way for us. So as we fly our way through this one, already on lap number 7, the restart there on lap 6, flourish off the pace because I'm not pushing right now. But here's the thing. Back to the story. I've been a fan for about 10 years. Now, I was coming into the sport with...
We've got a yellow flag here.
It had probably been about 10 years since I had seen any F1. I served in the Army for a few years and didn't see TV at all during that time. I then went to university for 6 years, got my master's. So that was another lengthy experience. So that decade, I hardly ever saw any TV during that time, and I certainly wasn't keeping up with a sport that I had barely been able to keep up with before that. I was always still a fan of it and always aware of it, but I hadn't known much of what was going on through that 10-year stretch of the early 2000s. Really not giving much of an effort in this one. I knew this was going to be a struggle. When I started watching over this last decade, at first, I was just a fan of the sport. I was just excited to finally be able to watch Formula One. I didn't immediately pick up a team and say, that's my team. Nothing like that. I didn't pick up any drivers. What happened over the first, I'd say, 4 years of watching Formula One for me was that I quickly decided that there's a few that I don't like. Because for me, there's a couple things that stand really, really, really high on my list of traits. One is integrity, and one is a moral code, a sense of justice. I've always rooted for underdogs. I've rarely rooted for favorites. That's been me ever since. I love to see underdogs perform. That gets me excited. And I tend to hate the big guys. So after a while, Ferrari, the perennial favorite, the big guy, the one that expends the most, became the one that I wasn't really on board with. Vettel rubbed me the wrong way for a number of years and eventually grew back on me when I realized how good of a person he was off the track. On the track, I saw his aggression. On the track, I saw him at Baku just drive straight into Hamilton because he thought he was brake checked when he wasn't. And I saw that anger. So I didn't like Vettel for a long time. Verstappen was somebody that I tried not to criticize. He was young. He was up and coming. He was aggressive. I wasn't a fan of how aggressive he was, but I figured he would learn in time, get better, make less mistakes. He had pace. Eventually I realized that the aggression was something that just got worse and worse, not better. Especially as he started competing for not just a position, but trying to compete for podiums and, eventually race wins. And I'll be honest, I despise Verstappen. I mean, I've tried not to be too obvious about that. At times, I can't help myself. 10th and 19th, as we are going to be heading into pit road this lap with both cars. I'm not even bothering to push is not exactly helping us out, but like I said, this race is a wash anyway. I'm just hoping for no mistakes on the pit stops. 2.253, phenomenal stop. And flourish. Another mistake. We've had more mistakes this season. This is race number 7 this year, right? The new calendar. We've had more mistakes this season than we've had any of the previous 2. We've had more mistakes this season than the 2 previous seasons combined now. This is getting ridiculous. And the pit crew is in wonderful shape with the lowest percentage chance of mistake that we've ever had. And yet they've still had more mistakes this year than the previous 2 combined. We've had some bad luck along the way. Crawford is 18th, Flourish is 19th, and we are well behind. So for me, what's occurred over those first handful of years as a Formula One fan was not jumping on any bandwagons or anything like that, but slowly but surely finding drivers that I found faults with. Nico Rosberg was somebody that I found faults with because of his driving style, because of his attitude. Slowly but surely, Verstappen was somebody that I found fault with because of his driving style and his extreme attitude. As for becoming a fan, after half a dozen years, I still wasn't a fan of any particular one driver or any one team. Williams became the underdog team that I fell for. And if I had to pick a favorite, that's my underdog team. That's my favorite. But something did happen over that stretch. The awareness. Now I know non-Hamilton fans think that Team LH is abrasive, aggressive, and take fault with them. But the reality is, there's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of people out there that are racist. This world has racism. This world has a lot of racism. And Lewis Hamilton has been at the receiving end of a lot of racism. He has suffered in ways that other drivers don't. He has been put under a microscope that others aren't. And not simply because of the number of championships he has won, as Crawford has caught Russell. He's got a poor exit. I'm not sure he's going to be able to get the kind of run this lap that he needs, but maybe up the hill. Up the hill, he swerves left, he swerves right, he swerves back again. Can't get it done. I have found in this game that while there are other overtaking spots, the only one that actually works is Al Raskas and using the DRS. Here we go. This time, we get alongside. We should be able to complete the overtake up the hill, and we do. I told you the 2 big things for me is my integrity and that sense of justice. The way that he's been attacked slowly but surely endeared him to me. It wasn't that he was winning races. It wasn't that Mercedes was quick. I don't support the big teams. I don't support the perennial winners. But I saw, and I told you this at the beginning with Andretti, the corruption. And I recognized the way that every gain that Mercedes would make, they'd make rule changes to directly target Mercedes and slow them down and back him up. And then the stolen championship. Over that season, I went from Hamilton had grown on me to I truly became a supporter of Hamilton, seeing that everything was stacked against him and the way he was being targeted and the way that Verstappen was being supported and given every advantage and continues to be given every advantage, and the way that they break the rules again and again and never get more than a slap on the pinky, not even on the wrist. And so for me, the sport has a hero and the sport has a villain. Hamilton's the hero, Verstappen's the villain, and yes, I know not everybody sees it that way, and I know that people that don't see it that way are not all racists, not even near, not the case at all, but some are. And that's what's pushed me in that one direction. That's what's pushed me to pick a side. The us versus them mentality, the us versus them scenario. Crawford's up to 13th. Others pitting a second time here. A lot of cars pitting a second time. Really surprising. But Tsunoda gets around. Russell's now a couple spots ahead of us. Crawford again overtaken. He's going backwards by cars on fresh compounds that can... Yeah. Huh. That's weird. Apparently you can overtake. Just Crawford going backwards. Reminder. We did this to him. He's on a 23% gearbox. But surprisingly, I think he would have been in the points today had I not nerfed him. Maybe. I mean, Russell's 9th. We at least could have been there, right? He's all the way down to 18th now. That's the reason why I became a Hamilton supporter. But again, still to this day, I'm still a neutral fan. I'm still someone who just enjoys a good race. And this last year, didn't have it. This last year was the first time in more than a decade that I skipped practice sessions. That I still watched every race, but even a couple of the races this year, I'm not someone who does the watch 10 minutes out of a 40-minute video. I watch 40 minutes out of a 40-minute video. I watch Critical Role. I watch a 4-hour D&D campaign, and the only skip that I do is their break session. I'll watch the entirety of it. That's who I am. That's how I operate. And even this last season, it was just too much. The snooze fest. The way that one team is allowed to go out and dominate, where they did the polar opposite during the Mercedes domination period. Mercedes, most of that period, didn't even have the best car. Ferrari did. 2.5 years, Ferrari was very much the quickest car. Hamilton just happened to, at some tracks, that was the thing about that period. Never, even when Mercedes was at its most dominant, and clearly was the best car, even then, that was on a track-by-track basis. There would be tracks where they were comfortably ahead of everybody else and cruising. But there were still tracks, even then, that Ferrari was significantly quicker, or at least a bit quicker, and would be comfortable ahead. And there were tracks where even Red Bull was quicker. Track by track, the different car profile made enough of a difference. Verstappen won here. Leclerc, Sainz on the podium, and we do end up 18th and 19th. Crawford couldn't handle it in the end, but could have. Russell did the exact same thing when we were right there with him, and Russell finished 8th. Had we had better components, we definitely wouldn't have been 18th. Would we have been 9th? Maybe? Could we have kept up with Russell? Maybe? Maybe not. Either way, I was very hands-off on that race. But there is no argument, while people try to make it, diehard fans, the ones that are the extreme fans, try to make it, try to ignore reality and believe what they want to believe. because it fits their narrative. And a lot of people do that. And I do that to a certain extent with things. I mean, we all do. But there is no valid argument that can say anything other than that rule change after rule change after rule change after rule change was targeted at Mercedes while Hamilton was driving for them, to nerf them, to back them up, to slow them down, to give others a chance. And others had a chance. He kept beating them anyway, until they literally, in the last race of a season in which he made the drive of all time, the second quickest car all year long, and he was beating Verstappen. And this is where, okay, up to that point, maybe someone could argue otherwise. Without a doubt, in that last race, the rules were changed in race, in the heat of the moment, to benefit one driver over another, with intention. The radio communication was there to back it all up. The evidence was all there, and the rules were violated directly to benefit one person. So my sense of justice was cemented. And this guy's the villain, the one that with the face up here at the top of the screen, and the other guy was the victim of that. For me, I am a supporter of his. I'll support him at Ferrari, even though Ferrari is the big dog, the villain, the team that I don't support. But I don't mind, at least not since they got busted. The fuel line incident where they were bypassing, right? The evidence came out, well, not officially, 2 sensors, or one sensor, and they were bypassing the sensor, right, to get the extra fuel injection. Now there's 2 sensors to get around that. And they were punished. Not severely, but they were punished enough where they clearly lost pace the rest of that season. That last 4 races, they were so far off the pace, they were out of the points entirely. They had to fight back, and they were very much slow the next year. That's a penalty. Red Bull keeps getting away with things. And why they're in bed with Formula One, with the FIA, I don't know. I don't know why. And I care to know, but I don't know why, and I won't speculate. But from my perspective, it's not right. But Hamilton, he's the real deal. And I don't think anyone can deny that the guy is quick. And he's a good person. I wish him luck at Ferrari. I'll support him there. But again, as I've said from the beginning of this story, sorry it's a long one, this is going to be a crazy long episode, I'm a fan of Formula One. I have a hard time dealing with the corruption that exists in there, and there's a lot of it. But for now, I put up with it. For now, I get on with it. It just drives me harder to support the one who's been the biggest victim of the corruption. And he's not the only victim of the corruption. He's just received the most. But for now, it's a sport I love. It's a sport I support. Williams, that's my underdog. I wish them luck in the future, in the season to come. They looked pretty good last year. That's going to do it for this episode, though. I'm Decathlon Gamer. Thanks for sitting with me through this story. Hopefully you've sat through this one and not just sped along and jumped in at parts and missed context and maybe jumped to conclusions. But I know that I'll always offend some because Verstappen does have fans. Not as many, but he certainly does have fans. Mean him no harm. He's just aggressive. And like I said, he's been on the wrong side of the corruption, and he's not responsible for all of that. So that's why I said, as much as I don't like Verstappen, it's not all on him, not all on his team, it's not all on the sport. It's a combination of factors. Anyway, have a good one. Be safe out there. Bye for now.